You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Dungeon Master of None.
A show for all your casual role-playing needs. And I feel like the stock in our name has gone down a little bit since everyone in Hollywood is terrible. So
yeah, that's true.
A Season Sorry also has a show called Master of None, and apparently he's still friends
which we
with
didn't
Louis
know about.
CK.
Didn't know anything about that. Totally unrelated to our podcast.
Yeah,
so
totally unrelated to our podcast.
If you were thinking about endorsing or not endorsing or enjoying or not enjoying our podcast based on any superficial similarity to Aziz Ansari, well, you can just think otherwise.
Well,
but we're going to talk about
so ancillary. We'll probably cut all of this out.
But we're going to talk about something hopefully somewhat less depressing.
Hell yeah.
Something called Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And if you're not a Dungeon and Dragons hyper nerd like Matt and I are, you might not be familiar, but this is the most recent offering from Wizards of the Coast, an official book that contains all sorts of goodies, both for DMs and for players. For players, the most exciting things are subclasses for every class, some very cool ones like the Samurai.
Yeah.
And
well, I just have to say, I feel like Wizards of the Coast is like fucking with me because I considered myself like a fairly Dungeon and Dragon-y person who should know about things and stuff. And they put out a book called Xanathar's Gum or whatever. I'm like, who is Xanathar? Should I know who Xanathar is? Right? I don't know.
Is Xanathar somebody? Because the last one was Volo, and Volo is an established character in the canon.
Right,
I'm not familiar with
Volo.
Xanathar.
I think they're just fucking with us. I think they're gonna make up weird names,
making up names.
I don't know. It's probably a better title set than like calling it like Player's Handbook 2 or Dungeon Master's Guide 2. That's a little off-putting.
I actually agree strongly with that. There's nothing less appealing when trying to pitch a game to new players than saying, well, here's Player's Handbook 1, and here's Player's Handbook 2, and here's Monster Manual 2 through 5,
right.
And you're going to need a few of these to make sense of things.
Well, you're automatically telling everyone that this one thing that you have is now incomplete. If there's a Player's Handbook 2, that means Player's Handbook 1 does not have all the things you need.
Correct.
Anyway, so it's called Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Okay, it's coming out this week.
Came out yesterday.
Okay,
Matt and I have not had a chance to do much, if anything, with it, but we've taken a look at the table of contents and read a little bit. I poked around.
So we're gonna make predictions for whether this
we're gonna talk
bust.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a boom. And here's my expert DM opinion: is that players love subclasses and they love the options and they love being able to make crunchy, character builds with lots of neat bits.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the
cool
things that made Pathfinder so popular, was that every book came out with dozens of subclasses or subclass options. So my prediction is boom, though it looks like most of the book is actually GM related and little fiddly bits, but I think a lot of people will buy it just for the subclasses.
Well, so it's
sorry, Matt, you were saying
it's 50-50, I think. One half for players' subclasses, which I agree players love. Other half Dungeon Master optional and more detailed rules, like tables of random encounters, which I forgot, but yeah, we definitely don't have enough of those in the DMG. You always need more tables.
There's really only... Yeah, they're definitely not specific enough. And one thing that you'll remember if you played at previous editions is that there were many varied and often hyper-specific random encounter guides that you could draw on anytime you were adventuring anywhere. So that's very cool. One thing that I'm excited about is the traps section. Traps are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you can freehand them and work with that, but it's more challenging than you think to design a good trap. And the more guidelines and the more text there is on that, I think that's better, especially for DMs who don't have a lot to draw on there. So that's particularly cool for me.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm excited about is, and we'll have to see how they actually play test out. I guess we'll have to do a little bit of play testing with all these before we give our final review. But I'm excited for the racial feats. If you know me, you know I love race. No, I love races in Dungeons and Dragons in that they always need more love, right? So I had an epiphany a couple of years back, and I feel like I was not smoking weed, but I should have been when I was talking with one of my friends. He's like, so at the beginning of a Dungeons and Dragons game, you pick a race and a class, like an elf and a ranger. But have you ever noticed how it's weird how you level up in a ranger, but you always say the same amount of elf? And bam! My mind was fucking blown. He's absolutely right. Like, throughout your campaign, you become more cleric-y, you get all these new cleric abilities, but after first level, like, your pick of a race has no mechanical impact on the game. Right? It can have whatever role-playing impact that you impart upon it. But I feel like there should be mechanical options, which of course will lead to role-playing decisions for your race. You should level up your race as well. So I think racial feats are a step in that direction. I'm worried because taking feats is always such a huge trade-off as it's set up in 5th edition, but maybe this will spur me to eventually publish my sort of alternative rule set for leveling up each of the core races as you level up your character. So every couple character levels, you get a benefit from your race. And the racial feats should be maybe a balanced guide to what I've already worked on. So I'm excited for the racial feats for my own home brewery and house rules.
And I agree with that. You're right that it's a good point that you never get better at being an elf.
Think about it, man.
You never get better
Or
at being an elf, or you never
man.
get more dwarfy, and maybe you should.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a thing. You know, in previous editions, you could do this somewhat through prestige classes,
Right.
something
There
like
were racial paragon classes,
dwarven defender or whatever.
But they
which
were
is
all they
cool
always
and-
sucked balls. Like you always had to like sacrifice a lot.
I'm going on the record now to disagree strong with Matt,
All right.
and the Dwarven Defender was fucking awesome,
All right.
and he's wrong. But
I mean,
anyway,
if you want to play a class that is cannot move, hooray! I've made a class where I can't move at all. If things come to me, I'll be fine. I feel like any smart GM is going to be like, fuck your little guy standing there who's invincible. I'll walk around him because he's tiny.
Matt is for getting pole arms and throwing hammers, but we're getting off the track. The point I was trying to make is that there were options before, and you should be able to get better at your race, and I think the racial feats do have a potential there.
All right, so that's what I'm excited about.
Are already a little weak in terms of mechanical differentiation in 5th edition. So the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and this is sort of a general thing, and I think this conversation could be useful for both GMs and for players, is downtime activities. And I want to talk about downtime activities in a general sense. Do they have a place in the campaign? Are they useful? Are they fun? And one of the interesting things, and I think why Matt and I are well suited to talk about this, is that Matt ran for me and some of our friends a Kingmaker campaign a while back.
And
which is,
for those of you who don't know what Kingmaker is, it's a adventure path published by Paizo. So this is the Pathfinder makers, and their adventure paths are big, sweeping, like 6-part campaigns. They will take you at a minimum a year, probably longer to play. And this one, Kingmaker, is an old school style hex crawl where you have a bunch of hex maps. It's it's more sandboxy than the other things. So players also have a kingdom to grow and foster that they rule, and they have a lot of downtime and a lot of control over when that downtime happens.
And it's, I think, the epitome of sandbox D&D play. If you were thinking, if you want your players to wander, or they want to be able to, for example, build a kingdom, absolutely either run Kingmaker or adapt it, or draw heavily from it, because I don't know that you can do better. But one of the many things that was interesting about it was that you would have resource points of various types, and you could go back to your town and build things, and you were encouraged to have roles in the town and to have side jobs or major jobs. In fact, in a lot of ways, adventuring was your side job, depending at certain points in Kingmaker, because you were spending a lot of your time being a king. So this brings me to downtime activities. So this is something that has always been a part of Dungeons and Dragons. It's something that may or may not have a place in your campaign. But when I say downtime activities, I'm talking about things like training. I'm talking about things like crafting items, talking about things like practicing a profession, gambling, pit fighting, opening a tavern. Are these things that we think are important enough to have rules attached to them? And if so, how do you think, Matt, do you think that's best approached?
All right. I'm going to just, based on our quick preview of this book and looking at the table of contents, here's my take on this. Yes, I think it's really great to have some rules for things like research, training, building magic items, but I'm also seeing rules for things like pit fighting, which if a player came up to me as like, okay, we're in this city that's got a bunch of pit fighters. I'm going to fight to the death for the next 2 months during campaign downtime. Like, well, you could actually die during that. I feel like we're going to move that to something that's not downtime, but is sort of on camera, on screen in our role-playing game. But then my bigger critique of downtime is, how does this relate to the story you're trying to tell, right? It probably relates to what characters want to accomplish. But, for example, one of my favorite downtime is when the characters have something going on that is a bigger picture thing that is, less interesting, that you're not constantly doing a role-playing scene for, but is related to the campaign. I ran a campaign where that was based in a city. Players were agitating for a rebellion in that city. There was some corruption in the guard. One of the players was a thief, and they fought some people from a rival sort of thieves guild criminal network, basically the mob of the town. And then they eventually decide, you know what, we're going to start our own mafia. We're going to have our own thing of our own thing. And so that worked out great, right? And that was a downtime activity, right? Players would say, okay, well, we finished this adventure. There's going to be a month till we have to do the next thing. And then I would ask the players to come up with like what their general strategy for their business is. Oh, we're going to buy up cheap land on the docks and start a protection racket or something like that. And then, next session I might have a encounter related to that, so that the players would know the choices they made in this sort of downtime, doing air quotes activity, would matter in the actual campaign. And that's my take. Piping hot. Sir
Nope,
Fred.
and I like it. And I think that the challenge for a DM is to make it so that this isn't just window dressing or side quest or irrelevant to the game at hand. You don't have to have every time your player goes and gambles have it tie into the main quest. But if they're going to spend a lot of time gambling, or if they're going to buy a tavern, or if they're going to make being a chef, as one of my players has, I'm not joking, I have a chef in my game. He's very enthusiastic about it.
Oh, yeah.
If they make that an important part of what they do when they're not adventuring, and you give them a lot of time to do those things, then an important thing to think about doing is, how are you as a DM going to integrate that into your game? So I generally am for this. In my recent games, I've been moving away from lots of downtime because I'm a control freak and I want to keep the narrative going. So I don't like to give my players a lot of free time to mess around. I also run games for a lot of new players, and if I don't give them strict guidelines, they tend to go really off the rails. But I do think that downtime activities, especially for experienced players, can be really, really cool. It gives them an opportunity to role play more thoroughly than just, I am a orc barbarian who smashes indoors and takes loot from dungeons. It gives another dimension of play.
Here's what you need to make that happen, I think, and I'm not seeing it on the outline. Maybe it's somewhere in Xanathar's gum. guide to players that we haven't seen yet. But like, it's your job as the DM to create places in your campaign, spaces, imaginary spaces, that the players find interesting enough that they would consider the life of their character outside of the direct spotlight, screen, action, conversation, or fight that they're having. So whether that's a city or, a cool castle or a trading post or wherever they're spending this downtime, it's got to be interesting enough that the characters would see themselves being invested in that world. So, I mean, I would have liked in this a sort of 2-page guide to creating that, because that seems like actually step 0 to downtime, right? Because your character can't be a chef if your game is only stuck in a dungeon, right? Maybe actually they can. I take that back, but they're not going to make money and not going to have rules for it. So you need an interesting space.
I thought that there was a section in here about settlements, but there's not. And I agree with you that a good starting point for downtime would be a section on setting, on how to create a setting or how to create an area where downtime makes sense. This is a great example. One of my games is set in Sharn, and after a year of playing in it, my players have become in the Eberron campaign. We'll talk about Sharn.
We're going to do a whole Eberron campaign episode. In fact, my mic is propped up on 2 Eberron source books right now, so it can reach my mouth.
So more on that later, but all you need to know is that it's a rich urban setting, and the more my players have gotten to know it, the more excited they've gotten about little things like their favorite tavern, or the bazaar that they like to go to, or a particular gambling hall. They've gotten more excited about interacting with those parts of the campaign and that part of the setting. So that makes it easier to build in downtime activities. Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about downtime, and we will talk more about Xanathar's after Matt and I have had a chance to take a look at it.
One other take that just sort of pissed me off is that there's a whole list of names, and then they decided to do languages by languages. Arabic, Celtic, Chinese, right? These are all languages. Egyptian, English, French. And then they get down to places that are not in Europe or the Mediterranean world or East Asia, and they're actually language families, right? Language groups, the biggest grouping of things. Polynesian is not a language group, but Niger Congo, there's 1,000 languages in the Niger Congo language family. So pick a single language from that. Be consistent, D&D.
I had a different take than Matt, because I was delighted to see that they didn't just put Africa on there.
Okay, right. At least they identified a specific language family.
I mean, the bar is set extremely low,
right?
But I thought that it was a good step forward to not just
Mesoamerican. Why not pick Nahuatl, right?
No, I agree. Okay, it should have been Nahuatl, and you could have divided it up if you were going to bother.
And if you're going to do African languages, why not pick a language from each of the, 7 language families that are present, or language groups that are present in Africa, which are all completely different. Anyway, all right. Mm-hmm. So I'm done being pissy about
No. I agree, though I have to be honest. My expectations are so supremely low for this type of diversity that I was impressed that they managed to get that granular.
I guess Slavic isn't a language either. It's a language family.
No, they were universally sloppy. Anyway, so Matt and I are gonna spend some time with Xanathars, and we'll talk a little bit more about it over the coming weeks. Because
actually buy it
because Wizards of the Coast has been. I think I like their strategy for books. I think they're doing a good job of doing a little bit of flavor and a little bit of crunch and not making anything that's too powerful. No Tome of Battle here. We'll see if it stays that way.
Yeah, we noticed that the Lore Master Wizard is very much absent from this book. So the one subclass that was universally decried as overpowered has been axed. Okay, so we thought we'd have a fun little conversation on helping you get started. We know a lot of you listening are starting a new campaign. So how do you have that session zero? So session zero might be a term for before you actually sit down and role play. That together you explain what's going on in this campaign to your players. And your players will probably make their characters, or at least start making their characters, so that next time you meet, everyone has a character, everyone knows what the sort of hook of the campaign or adventure is, and then you can begin. Now, this is only one option for starting to play Dungeons & Dragons. Last week we talked about how, you can write a campaign, you can write characters, you can just throw them out on the table or up into the air and have the players pick them up and they play that character that you've already made. But, after you've done that, you probably have players who want to make their own characters. How do you facilitate that? What's some fun things to do for a session zero?
And I want to support Matt in this. I think that a session zero is really, really important. It can be frustrating, especially if you're having trouble getting people together and scheduling, to waste time just talking and not actually playing. But I think that it's a huge and potentially important step to set expectations and to get everybody on the same page and make sure that the group works well together.
Well, so unlike every other game, right, you're not dungeon mastering directly, but don't be fooled. If you're playing in or running a session zero, you are still playing the game, and as a dungeon master, you still have to be on, right, to make sure that everyone is entertained. And most importantly, you have to sell the activity of making the campaign to your players. You got to say, hey, you are creating a character. This is a cool thing. This will be something you invest in, and you want to outdo each other with how cool your characters are. So let's do this together. And that's what you got to sell to your players.
That's a great point. And if you run it right, a session zero can be as much fun, if not more fun, than your first session. And if you run it right and you sell the expectation correctly and you do a good job of keeping everybody engaged, everybody will have a good time, and it will help you set the tone and make sure that the group works well together, which is, as we will talk about in a later episode, no doubt, probably the most important thing to running a good Dungeons & Dragons campaign, is making sure that you have good group cohesion.
So here are some fast and dirty tips and tricks to sort of running a session zero. I would say
Ticks and trips.
Here's the Xanathar's tips and trips to running a session zero. I would say one of the first things that you might want to do is express that hook of the campaign to your players. Now, this can be, you can scale this however you want. This could be immediately what's going on in the first session. For example, the first session is all going to be all of you have been captured by mind flayer slavers and are being transported across space to a giant brain farm where they're going to eat your brains if you guys don't escape, or something like that. So it could be immediately what's happening, or it can be more general, right? Maybe your first session isn't sort of that dramatic to your players. It could just be you guys are in a medieval world where two rival nations ruled by a brother and sister. War is about to break out in them. And so players know, okay, we got a medieval world. There's probably going to be a lot of war involved. Is my character a soldier? Are they opposed to war? Are they allied with the brothers faction or the sisters faction? That kind of thing.
One really key thing to do is to establish tone. And this is a little bit more advanced, and it may or may not make a difference depending on who your players are.
Right. Are you going to get characters named Bob the Fighter or Biggest Dickus? Or, so you gotta set the tone for what kind of characters you want.
And to be clear, Biggest Dickus is a great name for any character of any type. And I encourage your players to choose that. But it's about telling people what kind of campaign that you're going to run. So again, going back to my Eberron campaign, it's more pulp adventure, high swashbuckling type stuff. So I wanted to make sure that people were thinking a little bit more like Indiana Jones and a little bit less like Lord of the Rings. So I didn't get a whole lot of stuffy elves and stodgy dwarves, and it was great. People made, a little bit more interesting, a little bit flashier characters that fit better with the setting. If you're running a traditional Forgotten Realms campaign, then if people are thinking Lord of the Rings, that's perfect. One thing that you can do in your session 0 is have media that relates to that.
Hell yeah.
I had the Indiana Jones and some other related soundtracks playing while we were setting up our characters. That's a great thing to do. You could watch a movie beforehand if you really want to set tone for how you want the game to go, especially if you have one that's a good fit.
And then I would trick one, give them a hook for what the game might possibly be about, even like immediately next week or overall, right? Whether you're thinking big or thinking small. Trick 2, set the tone, right? Use music, make references to movies. This game is like Firefly with wizards. This game is like Babylon 5, right? That's going to tell players very different things. Trick 3, I would say, is before players, and some players will come already to the table, being like, I know I want to be a half-elf druid, right? I don't know, some people are just like that. Other people will come and see, well, I want to make a character that fits with everything. Encourage players to sort of craft statements about who their character is before they lock into a race and class or ability score combo. And we're stealing this from, I think this is Monty Cook's advice at the beginning of his Numeria books, where he says that you should make characters. I think it works great for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition or any session. You should create a sentence for your character with a subject and a verb and an object, right? Those are things that sentences in all languages have. Your character should have one too. If you're Indiana Jones, I am an archaeology professor who loots graves to put artifacts in a museum, right? You know what your character's trying to accomplish, how they accomplish it, that kind of thing. I like characters to write these kind of statements out.
One thing, and I'm derailing Matt's session because we didn't coordinate at all whatsoever before this.
Why would we do that?
One thing that I have found to be extremely important is there's a lot of Sturm und Drang about alignment, but I think alignment in parties is a lot less important. What you really need every character to have, and I demand that all my players have this, is a reason to belong to a party. If you have an aggressively antisocial person, they need to have a reason to belong to the party. And it can be a good reason, it can be a bad reason, it can be a weak reason, but it's not your job as DM to justify why they're going to be in the party. And you are going to get some players to say, well, my character wouldn't do that. And
Robert's hitting on a brilliant point here in that most of the time when people complain about, I can't stand having chaotic neutral characters in my campaign or even evil characters in my campaign, really what they're complaining about is people who've created a character who don't want to be part of a group, right? And so it's very important in session 0, and we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation, right? Role-playing is a shared sort of storytelling experience, a shared radio drama. And if you don't want to play that game, then don't. So when you make your characters, right, more important than alignment, right, is that all the players have a reason that they would need to work with others.
Exactly. So I don't make my characters be good. I don't make them be anything. I don't make them even need to lean towards any alignment, no matter what the campaign is. What I want is for them to have a reason to be a part of the party. If they're evil, maybe they see it as the best way to gain power. Maybe they just personally like one person in the party. That's a totally good reason. If they're good, that's easier. If they're lawful, that's even easier. Maybe they all have a shared goal. One thing that's easy to do is if you're having trouble is to have a general threat to all of them. That's a little bit more forceful, but if they're having trouble coming up with a reason to get along with each other, that's a good, under the gun way. But I like the one thing that I demand of my players is that they need to think about why their character would want to be a part of the group. Way more important than alignment.
So, and one of the things you can do, and we're just scratching the surface on how you can put a session 0 together. I've been in campaigns where in this sort of session 0 where we create characters, we've also created the entire campaign setting, which, maybe that's a little ambitious if you're first time, but it's also something you can do as players together, collaboratively do that. But if you want to take a step in that direction, so as Robert was touching on, right, you need a reason for your players to be together at the party. It could be they all receive a same threatening message. They all receive the same summons to meet an important NPC that's going to launch them on their quest into the unknown. They're all passengers on the same sailing ship. But if you want to go a more organic route for why they're all together as a party, as a group, I like to sometimes, not every campaign, it depends on the campaign, let the players come up with that reason together. Now, one of the ways you could do this is just sort of sit around like, okay, now that you've all made characters that are all radically different, I want you all to talk and come up with a reason why you're all together. Your players are probably going to fail at that task. However, if you trick them into taking that task in baby steps, you can have them succeed and have them own why they're a party. And I think that's kind of cool. One of the ways I like to do this, and so here's my plan. So let's say you got 4 or 5 players. You get some 3x5 note cards, okay? And you pass them out. So every player, you might decide every player gets 2, every player gets 3. And these note cards are precious. They are a resource. And if you use them well, you might actually start with some more starting equipment or something like that. You can tell them that kind of bribe if you think they need some encouragement. Players take these note cards and they play a little game of improv, right? So improv is the lowest of art forms, right? It's boring to watch, and never invite your friends to your improv things. But I'm asking the players to do a little bit of improv because improv is fun if you're one of the improvers, as opposed to the audience. You take the note card, you write down a sentence or a connection. I call them like little connection cards. And then you can pass that card to one of the other players. So, for example, Jask the Barbarian writes down, you once saved me from a pack of wolves, and I was the last member of my tribe, and you took me to civilization. So Jask the Barbarian writes that down, and he passes it to Sam the Wizard. And Sam the Wizard now had, the player who's playing Sam the Wizard now has the option of sort of accepting that card, so they could write yes at the bottom and just passing it back, therefore agreeing to what the player of Jask the Barbarian has proposed. Or they could write yes and or yes but, sort of your typical improv responses that will modify the story a little bit. So you saved me from a pack of wolves. I was the last member of my tribe, and you took me to civilization. Yes, but now you are my bodyguard and retainer, because I'm a weak wizard and you're a strong barbarian. Boom, hands it back. Jask the Barbarian could, of course, modify that further or sort of reject that, and they could try again. But if it succeeds, and for session 0, players are very amenable to this, boom, now Jask the Barbarian and Sam the Wizard have a shared backstory. They have a loyalty between themselves that makes for some interesting inter-party reactions. Pass these out, give every player 2. Make sure that when they pass them out, they can't pass more than 1 card to the same person, and that everyone has to get passed, the same amount of cards. That kind of rules, so everyone's connected. You might get 2 interlocking circles of players. You might get a whole web of why you're all connected. And then afterwards, have your players read them and go together. And then boom, you already have a shared backstory. What has happened before the campaign, exciting adventures, why your players are all together. So there's my pitch for the final and most complicated thing to do in session 0, connection note cards.
And I like this too, and I have done this with my players. I've done it via email ahead of time, which is, by the way, another thing you can do. Your session 0 can be over time, in a group chat or email if you want, though it is far better to have everybody in the room doing it at once if you can make that happen, though be aware that there are other ways. But this is a good challenge, especially if you feel like your players are up to it. If you think that they would be interested in a more unique role-playing experience, a better challenge than you're in a tavern and you're a guy, that this is a great way to get them to start thinking about their characters and to start role-playing ahead of time.
This is a way that players can take some ownership of the campaign, but you have to be aware as a DM that if you have a specific tone for the campaign, that you have communicated that enough that players are going to follow that tone. But you're risking letting players take control of the tone, a little bit more strongly, as they might end up passing cards around, and you find after everyone's done with this activity, everyone is step siblings that were once part of a very messy divorce, and or something like that. And if that's not what you envisioned for your campaign, well, you just sort of hype this up and sold this to players. You can't really tell them no. So
you do run the risk of ending up with some very awkward love triangles.
I think it's a good risk, though.
If you don't set expectations for your players, but that's on them. The great thing about this is that you didn't put them in the situation. They wanted to play the game that way, so they can. A way to do this, to maintain some control and to make it a little bit less risky or challenging for your players. And I definitely like Matt's method better, especially if you're trying to spark role-playing with amateur role players. But one thing you can do is have everybody come up with a relationship to a central NPC, like an innkeeper or a minor noble or a ranger in the area that you're starting out in. And so they say, I know this person because they saved my life once, or we fought in a campaign together, or we arm wrestled in an inn one time. In any case, that gives them a very easy way to attach themselves to the campaign. This of course only works if you have a campaign that starts somewhere with an NPC of some significance, but that's usually pretty easy to do. I'm stealing this from one of the Paizo modules, but I don't remember which one.
That would be Curse of the Crimson Throne, I think.
I think so.
Right,
I think
where there is a fortune teller, and I ran that campaign, but instead of having the, I had them all have that relationship with the central NPC, but I also did the note card thing, and it worked out really well. This is also the campaign where the players decided to become the mafia after killing the previous mafia. And then actually that became our game, because that was a lot more interesting to the players, is trying to take over a city through magical wizard mafias. They ran an extortion racket on the town's Hogwarts and made a lot of money until some demons were conjured. And
I can't believe we made it this far, Matt, without mentioning the classic Session Zero, which is the Canterbury Tales.
Ah! Ooh.
You had us do this for Kingmaker. And it runs a pretty high risk because you're asking your players to perform in a sense. But if you're not familiar, Canterbury Tales is a group of people on their way to Canterbury.
Yeah, read a book, listeners. Yeah, learn what Canterbury Tales are.
Read it in the original Old English, or else you're a loser. But as they're traveling, they tell stories to each other, and there's a knight, and I actually don't remember any of the other ones besides the knight. Matt, who else is there?
Paul Bettany, I think. That was from the Knight's Tale. He was Chaucer. Right?
The Knight's Tale is one of the Canterbury Tales. In any case, so you have your players, they're going somewhere, and they say, oh, who are you? Well, I'm a knight. Here's my tale. And this is a great way for them, especially if you've got players that like to talk about themselves or talk about their characters, to get them to open up and elaborate on their character a little bit and get to know each other. Again,
I used to be a high school teacher, and one of the things that students really struggle with, and your role players will struggle with, is writing a story or a essay with some narrative that goes somewhere. So you would probably, for less experienced players, want to give them a guide, like start their sentences for them, right? Hello, my name is. My name is. And then I look like this. You see a person who looks like this, right? And I grew up in this thing. This thing happened to me. I responded by doing this. My character came into their own when this happened.
So,
right?
so Matt is saying give them a prompt or give them an outline.
Yeah, outlines.
and I know he knows that because he taught high school. But if you're going to do the Canterbury Tales approach, both give them advance warning and maybe provide some guardrails so that it doesn't, literally become derailed. So we've talked about multiple ways to do a session 0.
I got one more. It's super simple and super fun. This is mostly because one of my last campaigns was all with a bunch of film studies graduate students and lecturers and assistant professors. So they obviously all really have a huge heart-on all the time for movies. So I said, when they're making their characters, right, and I told them the tone of the campaign in a bunch of movie-related analogies, but I said when they were making their characters that all their characters should be played by an actor. So if you want a look for your characters, tell them, okay, so you've made this character now. Who, if you were a Hollywood studio doing casting, who are the actors you would try and recruit to play this, right? So come up with a fun actor, and then you automatically have a look and a feel and maybe a voice for your character, right? Because I was going to say Mad Max played by Tom Hardy is very different than Mad Max played by Mel Gibson, but I don't want to think about Mel Gibson, so I'm going to cut that out. But you get the picture.
Right. So we've talked about multiple session 0 strategies. At the very basic, you want your session 0 to give your players a chance to create their characters. The bare minimum is you sit down and you go over their character sheets. That's the least you can do. The more time you have and the more enthusiasm you have for this and the better you are at setting expectations, you can really establish tone, build character, and lead into your first session with a really strong cast of characters, because that's what this really is. This is a shared drama. So whether you're going for a Canterbury Tales approach, whether or not you're going to hand out cards and do a little improv, or if you're just going to hand out a prompt or a way for them to be related to the campaign, this is something that you can and should, if you feel comfortable doing, set up for your session 0.
And if you got it ready, always end it on a positive and dynamic note with sort of maybe the first sort of rumblings of what's going to happen in the campaign or what's going to happen next week. You all arrive at this spooky place, or dramatic action is about to break out, to remind players that all this hard work they put into character creation will pay off.
And Matt and I are both decrepit people in their 30s who can't, set aside more than a few hours at a time. But if you can, there's absolutely no reason why you can't have your session 0 lead right into session 1. And that's a great way to do it, especially if everybody's pumped and enthused. So, but it's still a very important thing to do to set expectations and tone and get ready. So we're almost done here.
We didn't talk at all mechanically about session 0. I guess it's not that important for stats and rolling things. I honestly don't care.
We should maybe do a little maybe mini episode on rolling characters.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe one to squeeze in between this and session 1, but we'll talk about that right. Off the air. But yeah. I'm going to ambush Matt with a quick steal this item. Because I wanted to talk about something that I had been working on. And so we're going to workshop it real fast.
All right. Steal this shit.
Steal this shit. So, in my campaign, I am tinkering with time magic. My main foe has control over the flow of time, draconic prophecy. The details are not important, but I wanted to introduce an item
called Time Turner.
The bloody hell was that all about?
Time Turner. No, it's a Cerberus Dragon Shard, and I actually haven't come up with a name for it, so maybe we can work that out in the next 5 minutes. But it's a Cerberus Dragon Shard, and it allows the user, as a bonus action, to consume the temporal energy in the crystal, and the next turn have an additional action. And here's the key to this, is it is a one-use item. allowing anybody to have multiple actions more than once or more than a short rest like a fighter does is grossly overpowered. But what I think makes this potentially usable in a campaign is the fact that it has just one use. And what I wanted to hash out with you is how much it should cost and any of the limitations that there should be on an item like this. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this is that depending on your campaign, it can be anything you want. It could be a potion that makes you move faster.
I would definitely make it a potion and call it like coalesced time juice or something like that. And
something like that. Essence of time stream or something like that.
Oh, okay. But how much it should cost and how rare it should be? Interesting. Well, it's about equivalent to the
it
fighter's
basically equals
second
a fighter's
wind.
action surge,
yeah,
right?
Action surge. Yeah, sorry. Which is a once a day ability, right? Or once a long rest ability.
Once per short rest.
rest.
Per short rest.
And fighters get very few of these. They get one at like second level, and then
that's it.
Extra.
It's only ever one action surge, and it's very powerful, which is what gave me the idea for this.
Right, it is.
The other issue is that this replicates a fighter special ability.
Right.
So if we're going to hand this out to players, it should be valuable.
If you don't have any fighters in your party, I see zero problems with it.
Right.
And I would say since it's single use, this is definitely not common. It's in the uncommon to rare category, and I would value it. So an extra action is sort of the most precious extra thing you can get. It would have so many uses that I would value it basically as probably like twice whatever your most expensive best potion is. Like a potion of fly, like this is twice as good as that.
Yeah, so that's
I don't know how to value things in 5th edition, but
no. That would put it, and this is just me estimating. I'm not going to look anything up because that goes against the ethos of this podcast. I'm going to say somewhere between 800 and 1,000 gold pieces. And the reason why I'm valuing it so highly, I think that's probably a little overpriced, is because it is so valuable, and I think players would buy it anyway. And we'll talk about this later, but it solves or goes towards solving one of the problems of 5th edition is that people don't have things to spend their money on.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
And this is an exciting thing because you could imagine any organization that, so if I understand correctly, Cyberus dragon shards tend to fall in showers, according to the original lore, which you may or may not tinker with. So there could be a huge dangerous region inhabited by dangerous monsters or controlled by a dangerous organization that also has a lot of these shards. You can imagine if you could harvest them in bulk, say 20 to 100, that an organization equipped with these could easily destroy a rival. So I could think House Thrunai with 50 of these could take out the leadership of the other elf spy house or something like that.
And Matt has hit upon clearly what I'm working for with this, because they are going to. Well, you're exactly right. They are something that you can harvest, and if you could, replicate this technology, it would make whoever has enough of these shards very powerful.
And they could be a rumor to even more powerful ones, right? Is there one that gives you an hour of extra time out there that's huge and would basically allow you to, with the right magic items, take over the world, right? If you had an hour of super speed, you could assassinate every king in the world, and you're now...
This might be a lesser Cyberus Dragon Shard, but a greater one would allow you to basically cast Time Stop or something like that. All right, so
okay, cool.
I feel like we've got something good there. Matt, anything else you want to cover before we close out? We've been at this for almost an hour. We talked about Session 0. We talked a little bit about magic, about Xanathar's Gum Guide.
I think we're done here. I think we're done here. Shit.
All right, players, dungeon masters, friends, adventurers, thank you for your time, and we'll see you all next week.
Taza.
For I have the pride, the privilege, nay, the pleasure of introducing to you a knight sired by knights, a knight who can trace his lineage back beyond Charlemagne. I first met him atop a mountain near Jerusalem, praying to God, asking his forgiveness for the Saracen blood spilt by his sword. Next, he amazed me still further in Italy when he saved a fatherless beauty from the would-be ravishings of her dreadful Turkish uncle. In Greece, he spent a year in silence just to better understand the sound of a whisper. And so, without further gilding the lily, and with no more ado, I give to you the seeker of serenity, the protector of Italian virginity, the enforcer of our Lord God, the one, the only, Sir Ulrich von